for the better part of the last 25 years, the international community had been focusing, until relatively recently, on trying to get a comprehensive international treaty to deal with the problem and trying to force countries to take action. What we've seen in the last few years, what we call the new economics of climate change, is a reversal of this assumption that all domestic action, or even most domestic action, is net costly for countries. When you take into account that there are lots of opportunities to reduce emissions that are negative costs, that save money, like energy efficiency or reducing fossil fuel subsidies, when you take into account the extent to which clean technologies have fallen in cost over time, and there's enormous potential for costs to continue to fall with the right policies, and when you take into account these so-called co-benefits or non-climate benefits of action, you can actually see that when you put all of this together, with the right policies in place, countries can decarbonise their economies in ways that the benefits outweigh the costs. And this is, I think, a really new and quite revolutionary sort of set of understandings that have emerged, which completely reshape the policy domain for climate action. If we keep in mind this idea that the national benefits of acting will outweigh the national costs of acting over the medium term, that suggests that we don't have an economic problem. There's not an economic challenge in acting on climate, but that doesn't mean that there aren't political challenges or finance challenges or technical challenges. So some of the barriers are, even though the benefits outweigh the costs, how are those benefits and costs distributed across time and across agents? Well, we see that most of the costs are distributed to very, very powerful agents in the fossil fuel sector, companies in the fossil fuel sector and energy intensive manufacturing, and they're biased towards the short term, and politics and business are very short term focused. Whereas the benefits tend to accrue, even the non-climate benefits tend to accrue in the medium term over maybe 5-10 year time horizon. So this is the lower fuel costs from renewable energy, this is the air pollution benefits, this is macro productivity gains. They accrue in the medium term to a large number of actors. And so that makes the political economy of action still very difficult because it's very focused on short-term powerful actors. There are also financial challenges because even though the costs of, say, comparing renewable energy systems to fossil fuel systems over the long term will be cheaper to do renewable energy in a lot of countries, the financing component of the costs is usually high. There's a lot of upfront investment required. And if the cost of finance are high, that means the cost of the projects can be higher. So there are finance challenges. And there are also, I think, challenges around technology transfer for developing countries. There are often institutional barriers there. And there are other kinds of technical and operational challenges as well. Well, if you have this situation whereby it's in countries' national interests, medium-term national interests economically, to do things that also reduce emissions, then your rationale for international cooperation changes. And so the role for international diplomacy in the era of the new economics of climate change is much more targeted and nuanced, and it doesn't necessarily need to involve all 193 countries. What I think we need to see more of is small groups of countries and even bilateral cooperation targeted on overcoming these very nuanced barriers that I talked about earlier. These political economy barriers focused on helping to reduce costs of action over time even further. So for example, numerous countries could get together to agree to deployment targets for the next suite of renewable energy technologies that are currently expensive, like offshore wind, concentrating solar power. We could agree to deploy a certain amount of those, create markets for them, bring the costs down, which would benefit those countries and others. Coordination on research and development, again, to bring new technologies to market. Coordination on energy efficiency standards, minimum carbon pricing in emissions-intensive trade-exposed industries, cooperation on fossil fuel exports to supply-side policies. These are kind of the more nuanced areas where I think countries that are willing to take a leadership role need to get together and coordinate and help knock down some of those remaining political, technical, and cost barriers and spread the benefits more widely. So I think there's enormous opportunities for a more nuanced kind of economically beneficial climate diplomacy in the era of the new economics of climate change.